What would you do if the entire galaxy had one simple rule, a rule older than any empire, older than any alliance, older than history itself, and one powerful species decided they were strong enough to break it? Before we begin this incredible journey, take a second to support the channel. If you enjoy deep space adventures, unexpected human victories, and stories where humanity shows the universe what it is truly capable of, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who loves science fiction. The debris field stretched across millions of kilometers of empty space. There were no survivors. No damaged ships sending emergency signals. No escape pods drifting through the darkness. No desperate calls for help. Only silence. 312 warships had entered human space with absolute confidence, believing they were about to claim another easy victory. 312 powerful battleships belonging to the Breath Dominion. A fleet that had never known defeat. A fleet that had conquered civilizations, destroyed armies, and forced entire worlds to surrender without firing a second shot. But now, those same ships were nothing more than fragments of metal floating through the cold emptiness between stars. And I was the one who had to write the report explaining how it happened. My name is Oren Vale. I am a senior intelligence analyst for the Galactic Concord. For 31 years, I studied civilizations across the galaxy. I watched empires rise and fall. I watched peaceful worlds become battlefields. I watched powerful species make the same mistake again and again. They believed strength was measured only by weapons. They believed victory belonged to whoever had the largest fleet, the strongest armor, or the most terrifying reputation. But after everything I witnessed, I learned something different. The most dangerous species in the galaxy is not always the one with the biggest weapon. Sometimes, it is the one that refuses to stop. The Galactic Concord was the closest thing our galaxy had to a government. 47 recognized species. Thousands of inhabited worlds. Centuries of agreements designed to prevent endless wars. There were many laws inside the Concord. Do not destroy civilizations. Do not enslave intelligent species. Do not use weapons that threaten entire planets. But there was one rule that existed before all of them. A rule that was never officially written. A rule that had no author. No date. No document. No signature. It was simply known. Every species that traveled between stars eventually learned it. Do not hunt the humans. Do not attack human territory. Do not threaten humanity unless you are prepared to accept the consequences. Nobody knew where the law came from. Nobody knew why it existed. But everyone followed it. The strange thing was that humans themselves did not even know about it. They did not ask for protection. They did not demand respect. They did not threaten anyone. They simply lived. For 9 years, I watched Earth from a distance. My assignment was considered one of the easiest positions in the intelligence division. Sector 7 Null. A boring name for a quiet region of space. 1 yellow star. 8 planets. 1 inhabited world. Earth. The human home world. My mission was simple. Observe. Record. Report anything important. For 9 years, I studied humanity without them knowing. I watched them build machines that could leave their planet. I watched them send small metal probes into the darkness of space. I watched them create art, music, stories, and impossible inventions. I watched them argue with each other constantly and then somehow work together when something truly mattered. That was the thing about humans. They were confusing. They were emotional. They were unpredictable. One moment they could fight over the smallest disagreements. The next moment, millions of them could unite to solve a problem that seemed impossible. They were not the strongest species I had ever studied. They were not the fastest. They were not the largest. Compared to many alien civilizations, humans looked almost fragile. Their bodies had no natural armor. They had no claws. No sharp teeth. No biological weapons. If you looked only at physical measurements, humans seemed average. Maybe even weak. But intelligence reports rarely captured the entire picture. Because there was something about humans that every scientist who studied them eventually noticed. They never stopped. A human could fail thousands of times and still try again. A human could face impossible odds and somehow believe there was another option. They were a species that looked at the universe and saw not a barrier, but a challenge. And that was something I found fascinating. Until the day everything changed. The Breath Dominion had existed for almost 200 years as one of the greatest military powers in the galaxy. They were everything humanity was not. They were massive. They were physically terrifying. The average Breath stood over 4 meters tall, covered in natural armor that had evolved through millions of years of survival on a brutal planet. They were born warriors. Their entire civilization was built around conquest. They believed the galaxy belonged to the strong. They had defeated 11 different species. They had absorbed entire civilizations into their empire. And then they discovered Earth. I intercepted their transmission on a normal work cycle. The message was encrypted with Breath military codes. Codes that the Concord had studied for decades. When I translated the message, I expected another military report. I expected information about another conflict. Sector 7 null. Population estimated, 9 billion. Technology level, pre-interstellar. Defensive capability, insignificant. No major alliances. No recognized military support. Recommendation, immediate resource acquisition. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. Because I was waiting for something to change. Some hidden meaning. Some indication that this was not what it appeared to be. But it was exactly what it appeared to be. The Breath had found humanity. And they believed humanity was weak. They believed humans were alone. They believed the oldest law in the galaxy did not apply to them. I immediately sent the information to my supervisor, Director Ellen Hose. Her response came faster than any message I had ever received from her. Report to the bridge immediately. Do not speak to anyone on the way. When I arrived aboard the Concorde cruiser Valenthy, the entire bridge was silent. Director Hose stood in front of the main display. She was watching something. Something that had already happened. Something she knew would change everything. The Breath fleet crossed into Sector 7 null 40 minutes ago, she said. I looked at the display. Hundreds of red markers moved through space. 312 warships. Heading toward Earth. Should we intercept? I asked. Director Hose turned toward me. Her expression was unlike anything I had ever seen. No. I thought I misunderstood. No. Pull every Concorde vessel back to the boundary line. But Director, there are billions of humans on that planet. I know. They have no idea what is coming. I know. Then why are we doing nothing? She looked back at the display. At the fleet moving toward Earth. At the species that had no idea it had become the target of the most dangerous empire in the galaxy. Then she said something I would remember forever. We observe. We record. And we allow the law to teach them what we failed to explain. I did not understand. Not at that moment. I thought we were abandoning humanity. I thought the Concorde was making a terrible mistake. But I was wrong. Because we were not watching humanity lose. We were watching the galaxy discover why the oldest law existed. The Breath Fleet entered the human solar system with the confidence of a species that had never been defeated. They did not hide. They did not move carefully. They did not send scouts ahead. They wanted humanity to see them coming. They wanted fear. They wanted surrender before the first shot was fired. Their ships moved toward Earth like predators approaching helpless prey. But they did not understand one thing. They were not entering the territory of prey. They were walking into the home of a species that had spent thousands of years preparing for impossible situations. And they had no idea that humanity had been watching the stars too. They thought Earth was sleeping. They were about to learn that humans had simply been waiting. The Breath Fleet continued its journey toward Earth. Every hour they moved deeper into human territory. Every hour they became more confident. From their perspective, everything was happening exactly as expected. A weak civilization. An isolated planet. No visible military response. No large defensive fleet. No powerful allies arriving to help. To the Breath, it was not a war. It was an acquisition. They had done this many times before. They believed the humans would eventually understand the difference between fighting and surviving. The difference between pride and reality. But the Breath had made the same mistake that many powerful species before them had made. They judged humanity by what they could see. And they never looked for what was hidden. From my station aboard the Valanthi, I watched their approach. The human solar system appeared peaceful. Almost too peaceful. The third planet from the yellow star remained quiet. Earth. A small blue world. A planet that, according to every official Concord report, had no significant military presence. The breath sensors showed nothing that concerned them. No warships. No orbital weapons. No massive defense network. Only a civilization that was still learning how to travel between stars. The breath commander must have been laughing. Because from his perspective, the galaxy had handed him the easiest victory of his career. But I noticed something strange. Something that did not appear in the breath reports. Something small. Something that almost everyone would have ignored. There were changes in the human system. 3 years earlier, when I had completed my last major observation report, Earth had several research stations around its outer planets. Small facilities. Scientific outposts. Places where humans studied their own solar system. But now those locations were different. The first thing I noticed was Jupiter. The largest planet in the human system. Its moon showed energy readings that had not existed before. Not research equipment. Not normal exploration technology. Something else. Something much more advanced. I compared the old data with the new readings. Again. And again. The changes were real. Humanity had been building something. And they had done it quietly. That alone was surprising. But then I noticed the asteroid belt. Exactly what any civilization would expect. But after analyzing the movement patterns, I noticed something unusual. Certain areas of the belt had been organized. Not naturally. Not by gravity. By design. The asteroids were arranged in patterns. Open pathways had been created. Large objects had been moved into specific positions. The work was too precise to be random. Someone had been preparing the area. Preparing it for something. I marked the information in my report. Unknown human activity. Possible industrial development. No immediate threat detected. At the time, I still did not understand. I was looking at the pieces. But I had not yet seen the picture. The breath fleet reached the orbit of Earth's moon. They stopped there. Their flagship moved into position above the gray surface of the moon. A perfect location. A perfect demonstration of power. Then Admiral Corvin opened a communication channel. The message was broadcast throughout the entire system. It was not encrypted. It was not hidden. The breath wanted humanity to hear every word. Inhabitants of the third planet, the message began. You have been identified as a valuable resource location for the Breath Dominion. Your planet, your infrastructure, and your population will now become part of Dominion control. Resistance will not be successful. Those who cooperate will be processed efficiently. Those who resist will face military consequences. You have 1 hour to transmit your surrender. I listened to the message in silence. I expected panic. I expected emergency broadcasts. I expected humans to respond with fear. But Earth remained quiet. The hour passed. The breath waited. Their weapons remained ready. Their ships remained in formation. Then the timer reached 0. Nothing happened. The breath interpreted this as weakness. They believed humanity had accepted defeat. Then, 61 minutes after the original message, Earth responded. But the transmission did not come from Earth. That was the first thing that confused everyone. The signal came from 3 different locations. One source was near Jupiter. 2 others were hidden in the asteroid belt. The breath had flown directly past them. The message was short. Only 42 words. A human voice spoke calmly. No anger. No fear. No desperation. Just certainty. This is Commander Dale Farrow of Earth Unified Defense Coordination. You have entered sovereign human space without authorization. You have issued a hostile demand against our civilization. You have 48 hours to withdraw beyond our system boundary. If you do not withdraw, we will remove you. This is the only communication you will receive. The message ended. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Even the breath seemed confused. Then their communications exploded with laughter. They could not believe what they had heard. Remove them? The humans? The same humans who had no known fleet. The same humans who had no official place among the major civilizations. The breath commander considered the message a joke. Their internal communications were easy for us to intercept. We have been threatened by primitive species before. They believe confidence equals strength. 48 hours. The humans are entertaining. The breath laughed. The Concord did not. Because we understood something they did not. Humans had not asked for time. They had given the breath a deadline. There was a difference. For the next 48 hours, the breath prepared for an attack that never came. They scanned Earth. They analyzed human cities. They calculated resources. They planned their occupation. They believed they were studying their enemy. But the truth was different. Humanity was studying them. During those 48 hours, the breath watched the planet. They saw no movement. No visible preparation. No emergency fleet launching from Earth. No obvious signs of resistance. To them, it confirmed everything they believed. Humans were afraid. But from my observation station, I saw something else. The asteroid belt continued changing. Slowly. Quietly. The hidden objects moved into position. The energy signatures around Jupiter increased. And then something happened that changed my understanding of humanity forever. The human communication network went silent. Completely silent. For almost 50 years, humanity had filled its own system with signals. Messages. Research data. Navigation information. Entertainment broadcasts. Millions of transmissions every day. Then suddenly. Nothing. The breath thought it was surrender. They thought humanity had accepted defeat. But I knew better. Because silence was not always weakness. Sometimes silence meant preparation was complete. The 48-hour deadline ended. The Breath Fleet moved into attack position. At exactly 48 hours and 11 seconds after Commander Pharaoh's message, humanity answered. The first thing that happened was something the Breath never expected. The moons of Jupiter fired. The weapons were not traditional missiles. They were not explosives. They were simply metal. Massive projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds. Objects moving so fast that they became weapons of unimaginable power. The Breath defensive systems reacted immediately. They were one of the strongest military forces in the galaxy. Their shields activated. Their point defense weapons fired. Thousands of small interceptors launched. And they destroyed many of the incoming projectiles. But not enough. Because humanity had not fired one weapon. They had fired a plan. The first impact struck the Breath formation. 12 warships disappeared almost instantly. Not damaged. Not disabled. Gone. The Breath response was immediate. Their commanders ordered evasive maneuvers. Their ships moved into combat formation. They prepared to return fire. And then the asteroid belt moved. The objects they believed were simple rocks activated. Engines that had been hidden for decades came online. Energy systems that had remained silent suddenly awakened. The asteroids were not asteroids. They were ships. Massive human vessels built inside the shells of giant rocks. Hidden. Waiting. Watching. The Breath had entered human space believing they were hunters. But now they discovered something terrifying. They had not found an unprotected planet. They had entered a trap. And the trap had been waiting for them for years. The Breath commander finally understood something. The humans had known this day could come. They had prepared without announcing it. They had built without showing it. They had waited without fear. And now, for the first time in hundreds of years, the Breath Dominion faced an enemy they could not intimidate. An enemy they could not predict. An enemy that did not fight like any species they had conquered before. Because humans did not fight for victory. They fought to finish the problem. The first moments of the battle were impossible to understand. Not because the humans were stronger. Not because their weapons were more advanced. But because everything they did had already been planned. The Breath had expected a desperate defense. They expected chaos. They expected a frightened civilization throwing everything it had into one final attempt to survive. Instead, they found something completely different. They found patience. Every human action had a purpose. Every movement had a reason. Every weapon was placed exactly where it needed to be. The Breath Dominion had spent centuries mastering war. They had studied countless enemies. They understood anger. They understood fear. They understood desperation. But they did not understand preparation. And that was their first mistake. From my station aboard the Valanthi, I watched the battle unfold. The human defenses continued activating throughout the solar system. Hidden platforms emerged from behind moons. Small defense ships launched from locations the Breath had considered empty. Stations that had appeared to be scientific facilities revealed military capabilities that no one had known existed. The Breath commanders struggled to update their calculations. Their entire strategy was built around information. They believed that if they understood their enemy, they could defeat them. But humanity had created an enemy that could not be measured by appearances. The Breath saw a planet. Humans had built a fortress. The Breath saw silence. Humans had created a strategy. The Breath saw weakness. Humans had been waiting. The first hour of the battle was devastating. The human weapons did not overwhelm the breath through raw power. They overwhelmed them through coordination. Every attack forced the breath to react. Every reaction created another opening. The breath fleet was powerful, but they were fighting an enemy who had already considered every move they could make. Their formations changed. Human weapons adapted. Their ships retreated. Human vessels followed. Their commanders attempted to create new strategies. Human forces had already prepared responses. It was not a battle between two fleets. It was a battle between two ways of thinking. The breath believed war was about crushing an opponent with overwhelming force. Humanity believed war was about solving a problem. And problems had solutions. One of the most surprising moments came when the human boarding teams arrived. The breath had expected missiles. They expected more weapons. They expected destruction. They did not expect humans to come aboard their ships. The small human vessels moved quickly through the battlefield. They were difficult to track. They were not large. They were not intimidating. Compared to breath military armor, the human suits looked almost primitive. A breath soldier would have laughed at them. Until they saw what those humans could do. The boarding teams did not move like warriors seeking glory. They moved like engineers repairing a machine. Calm. Precise. Focused. They cut through breath ship hulls. They disabled systems. They captured important areas. They moved from one objective to another without hesitation. No unnecessary movement. No wasted energy. The breath did not understand it. They had fought species that attacked with rage. They had fought species that fought with desperation. They had fought species that surrendered. But humans were different. Humans were not fighting emotionally. They were working. One breath commander sent a message during the battle that was later studied by military experts across the galaxy. They do not fight like prey. They do not fight like warriors. They fight like they are taking apart a machine. That single statement explained everything. The humans were not trying to prove they were powerful. They were not trying to create fear. They were simply completing a task. And that terrified the breath more than any weapon could. Because fear could be controlled. Anger could be predicted. Pride could be manipulated. But a species calmly completing a mission was something entirely different. The battle continued for 11 days. 11 days of constant fighting. The breath refused to surrender. They were too proud. Too experienced. Too convinced that defeat was impossible. They fought with everything they had. And they were still dangerous. I want to make that clear. The breath were not weak. They were one of the greatest military powers in the galaxy. Their ships were advanced. Their soldiers were skilled. Their commanders were experienced. Against almost any other species, they would have won. But humanity was not almost any other species. Slowly, the breath fleet began losing ground. One ship at a time. One position at a time. One mistake at a time. The humans did not destroy them quickly. They did something much worse. They wore them down. The breath were used to battles that ended. A victory. A defeat. A surrender. But humanity turned the conflict into something else. A process. A long, unavoidable process. Every day, the breath lost more options. Every day, humanity became closer to completing its objective. By the 8th day, the breath made their decision. They would retreat. Their remaining ships formed a defensive pattern and began leaving the human system. From a military perspective, it was the correct choice. They had lost too many ships. They had lost control of the battlefield. Continuing would only cause more casualties. So they escaped. At least, they thought they escaped. I watched the human ships follow them. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I checked the sensor readings again. No. They were following. The human fleet was leaving the solar system. They were chasing the breath. I turned toward Director Hose. They're following them. She remained silent. Director. She looked at the sensor display. Then she said something that I still remember. Yes. Why? She looked at me. And for the first time since I had known her, I saw something unusual in her expression. Not fear. Not exactly. Something closer to understanding. Because that is what they do. I did not understand her answer. Not then. But I would. The breath thought the battle was over. They believed they had survived. They believed humanity had defended its home and would stop there. They did not understand the difference between defense and pursuit. Humanity was not chasing them because of anger. They were not seeking revenge. They were preventing the same problem from happening again. The breath had entered human space. They had threatened Earth. They had started something. And humanity had decided to finish it. That was when the Concord made a discovery. A discovery that explained the ancient law. The law nobody understood. The law everyone followed. Do not hunt the humans. Director Hose opened a sealed archive that had not been accessed in more than 3,000 years. The archive existed beneath the Valanthi. Hidden. Protected. Forgotten. Inside were records that the Concord had never released to the public. Records about humanity. Records about the first contact. Records about why the galaxy feared this small blue planet. For 18 hours, we read. And the more we learned, the more everything changed. The first contact between humans and another intelligent species did not happen when the Concord discovered Earth. It happened 12,000 years earlier. Long before humanity had reached the stars. The species that found them was called the Onari. The Onari were advanced. They were explorers. Scientists. A peaceful civilization that believed knowledge should be shared. When they discovered Earth, they did not see a threat. They saw curiosity. They saw another intelligent species beginning its journey. They saw potential. The early records described the relationship between humans and the Onari as one of the greatest examples of cooperation in galactic history. The humans learned quickly. Faster than expected. Onari scientists were amazed by how quickly humans adapted. Human engineers took alien technology and improved it. Human researchers found new uses for discoveries that had existed for centuries. The Onari believed they had found a partner. A civilization they could grow beside. But then something unexpected happened. The Onari did not disappear because humanity destroyed them. They did not vanish because of war. They became part of humanity. Their knowledge. Their culture. Their people. Everything became connected with the human story. The humans did not conquer them. They absorbed them. They learned from them. They changed because of them. And the Onari changed because of humanity. Thousands of years later, their civilization no longer existed separately. But their influence remained everywhere. Their technology. Their ideas. Their history. All carried forward through humanity. The Concord historians had written one sentence that stayed in my mind. Humanity does not conquer. Humanity does not destroy. Humanity encounters, learns, and incorporates. At first, I thought that was a beautiful description. Then I realized something. It was also a warning. Because humanity did not simply defeat things that threatened it. Humanity adapted. It changed. It learned. And once humanity decided something was important, it never stopped. The more I read the archive, the more I realized that the ancient law was not created because humanity was weak. It was created because other species finally understood what humanity could become. The galaxy had made a mistake. For thousands of years, civilizations had measured danger incorrectly. They looked at size. They looked at weapons. They looked at military numbers. They looked at physical strength. But humanity was different. Humanity was not dangerous because of what it had. Humanity was dangerous because of what it could become. The next section of the archive was focused on human biology. At first, I did not understand why a military archive contained biological studies. Then I started reading. And I understood. Most intelligent species in the galaxy evolved in one of two ways. They were either ambush predators or pursuit predators. Ambush predators relied on sudden power. They were fast. They were strong. They ended conflicts quickly. The breath were the perfect example. They were built for overwhelming force. Their bodies were designed to attack. Their minds were designed for immediate action. They were terrifying because they could destroy an enemy before that enemy had time to react. But humanity evolved differently. Humans were not the strongest predators on their planet. They were not the fastest. They were not the most physically impressive. Their ancient prey was often stronger than them. Faster than them. More dangerous than them. Yet humans still hunted them. The reason was something alien scientists struggled to understand. Humans could continue. They could follow. They could wait. They could endure. A human did not need to catch something immediately. A human simply needed to keep moving. The animal would eventually become tired. The human would still be there. The ancient hunters of Earth did not win because they were stronger. They won because they refused to quit. That trait survived. It evolved. It became part of humanity itself. The xenobiologists had given it a name. Persistence predation. A hunting strategy unlike anything seen anywhere else. A predator that did not rely on speed. A predator that did not rely on strength. A predator that relied on time. And suddenly, everything made sense. The breath had entered human territory believing they were hunters. But humans understood something the breath did not. A hunt has two sides. The hunter. And the hunted. The breath believed they were chasing humanity. They never considered the possibility that humanity could chase back. The archive continued. Human psychology. Human behavior. Human decision-making. The researchers had noticed something unusual. When humans decided something mattered, they could maintain focus for extremely long periods. Other species made decisions based on immediate conditions. If a strategy failed, they changed direction. If the cost became too high, they withdrew. Humans were different. A human could change tactics. A human could adapt. A human could completely redesign the plan. But the goal remained. The goal stayed. The humans simply found another path. The report described this ability as functionally inexhaustible determination. A phrase that seemed almost impossible. But after watching the breath invasion, I understood. Humans did not win because they had better weapons. They won because they had already decided what the outcome needed to be. And once humanity decided, the universe had learned not to stand in the way. After reading the archive, I finally understood why the Concord had hidden the information. They were afraid. Not of humanity. Not exactly. They were afraid of how other species would react. If the galaxy learned the truth about humans, some civilizations would become terrified. They would see humanity as a threat. They would try to destroy humanity before humanity became too powerful. Others would make the opposite mistake. They would underestimate humans. They would believe that because humans appeared peaceful, they were harmless. Both choices would lead to disaster. So the Concord created the oldest law. Do not hunt the humans. But they made one mistake. They never explained why. They allowed the law to become a mystery. A superstition. A rumor. And eventually, a challenge. The Breath Dominion saw the rule as evidence of weakness. They thought the galaxy was afraid of humans because humans had powerful allies. They thought the law existed because humans were protected. They never imagined the truth. The law existed because humans did not need protection. The law existed because everyone else needed protection from making the wrong decision. 3 weeks after the Breath invasion began, I was no longer just an observer. I became something else. A witness. The human fleet had reached the edge of Breath territory. And the entire galaxy was watching. For the first time in history, everyone saw what humanity had been hiding. The fleet was not the defensive force that protected Earth. That was only the beginning. The asteroid ships. The moon weapons. The hidden stations. Those were not humanity's true military power. They were simply the walls around the house. The real force was waiting outside. The human fleet contained 37 massive vessels. Each one larger than any ship the Breath had brought to Earth. Each one built over decades. Each one hidden inside asteroid shells. For 41 years, humanity had constructed them. 41 years of silent work. 41 years of moving materials through space. 41 years of preparing for a danger that might never come. And nobody knew. Not the Concord. Not the Breath. Not even many human governments. When I later asked Commander Dale Farrow why humanity built such a fleet, her answer surprised me. We weren't sure we would need it. She paused. We just knew we should have it. That sentence explained humanity better than any scientific report. Humans prepared for possibilities. They imagined disasters before they happened. They built solutions before problems appeared. Sometimes people called it paranoia. But in space, paranoia was often another word for survival. The human fleet followed the retreating Breath ships. Not quickly. Not aggressively. They simply followed. Like ancient hunters following a trail. The Breath noticed eventually. At first, they believed the humans were trying to intimidate them. Then they believed the humans wanted revenge. Then they became confused. Because humans were not attacking. They were just there. Always there. Never stopping. The Breath had escaped the battle. But they had not escaped humanity. That realization caused panic throughout the Breath command structure. For the first time in generations, they experienced something they had caused in others many times before. Fear. The Breath held emergency meetings. They reviewed every battle report. They analyzed every human strategy. But every answer created more questions. How did humans hide such a fleet? How did they predict Breath movements? How did they know exactly how to counter their tactics? The answer was simple. Humans studied. Humans learned. Humans adapted. The Breath had spent centuries conquering species that fought the way they expected. Humanity did not. That was why the Breath were losing. Not because humans were stronger. Because humans were unfamiliar. And the unknown was something even the strongest empire feared. During this time, the Concord leadership demanded answers. They wanted to know what humanity planned to do. Were they going to destroy the breath? Were they going to conquer breath worlds? Were they going to punish an entire civilization for the actions of its military? Nobody knew. So the Concord decided to contact Commander Pharaoh. I was chosen to deliver the message. I still remember the first time I entered a human ship. It was unlike any military vessel I had ever seen. Most alien warships were designed to intimidate. They were covered in symbols. Large weapons. Decorations showing power. Human ships were different. They were practical. Everything had a purpose. Nothing existed simply to impress. The ship felt less like a weapon. More like a tool. A tool designed by people who knew exactly what they needed it to do. Commander Dale Pharaoh met me near the docking area. She was not what I expected. After everything I had seen, I expected someone aggressive. Someone proud. Someone who enjoyed power. Instead, I found someone calm. Quiet. Almost ordinary. She looked at me and smiled. Oren Vale. I was surprised. You know my name. She laughed softly. We have known you were watching us for years. That sentence stopped me. You knew. Of course. I had no response. For 9 years, I believed humanity had no idea. But they knew. They always knew. Commander Pharaoh invited me inside. She offered me something humans seemed to love more than almost anything else. Coffee. I had studied humans for years. I had read thousands of reports. I had watched their broadcasts. But sitting there, sharing a simple drink with a human commander, I finally understood something. Humans were not mysterious because they hid everything. They were mysterious because they were complicated. They could build weapons powerful enough to destroy fleets. Then spend hours creating music. They could prepare for war. Then still hope war never happened. They could defeat an enemy. Then question whether victory was the right word. I delivered the Concord's message. I explained the legal situation. I explained the concerns. I explained the fear spreading across the galaxy. Commander Pharaoh listened carefully. When I finished, she remained silent for several moments. Then she asked one question. How long has the Concord known about the law? I knew exactly what she meant. The oldest law. The one about not hunting humans. The law existed before the Concord. She nodded. And did you know why? I thought about the archive. The hidden history. The truth the galaxy had forgotten. Yes. She looked away. For a moment, I expected anger. Instead, she simply said. Nobody thought to tell us. I did not know what to say. Because she was right. The galaxy had spent thousands of years protecting humanity from others. But nobody had ever considered telling humanity why. Then Commander Pharaoh looked back at me. And she said something I would never forget. We are not angry. Her voice was calm. We understand why the Concord watched us. But we are not going to stop. I looked at her. Why? She answered immediately. Because they came into our home. Because they threatened our people. And because if we stop now, the next species that thinks about hunting us will believe stopping is weakness. She paused. We are not continuing because we want revenge. We are continuing because problems left unfinished usually return. Then she looked directly at me. Humans finish what they start. And in that moment, I finally understood the oldest law in the galaxy. Do not hunt the humans. Not because humans were monsters. Not because humans wanted destruction, but because once humanity decided something needed to end, nothing in the universe could convince them to stop. The words of Commander Dale Farrow stayed with me long after our conversation ended. Humans finish what they start. At first, I thought it was simply a statement about determination. A human trait. A cultural habit. Something interesting but not dangerous. But as I continued traveling with the human fleet, I realized I had misunderstood. It was not just determination. It was something deeper. It was a way of thinking. The humans did not see the conflict with the breath as a war in the way the rest of the galaxy understood war. Most species viewed war as a competition. Two sides. Two armies. A winner. A loser. Humans viewed it differently. To them, the breath invasion was a problem. And problems had solutions. The breath had created the problem. Humanity was now creating the solution. That was why they continued. Not because they were angry. Not because they wanted glory. Not because they wanted to expand their territory. They continued because they believed leaving the problem unfinished would only create another problem later. It was terrifying. But it was also strangely logical. The Breath Dominion had never faced an enemy like this. They had fought civilizations that feared them. They had fought civilizations that hated them. They had fought civilizations that wanted revenge. But humanity wanted something else. Prevention. The Breath had spent centuries creating fear throughout the galaxy. Now they were experiencing the same feeling. They were being followed. Every jump. Every movement. Every attempt to hide. Human ships appeared again. Always watching. Always approaching. Always patient. The Breath attempted everything. They changed routes. Humanity followed. They created false signals. Humanity ignored them. They divided their remaining fleet into smaller groups. Humanity predicted their movements. The problem was that the Breath had built their entire military philosophy around overpowering enemies. They had never needed to understand them. They had never needed to study patience. Because nobody had ever forced them to. Humanity was forcing them now. As the human fleet approached Breath territory, the entire galaxy watched. The Concord received thousands of messages. Some demanded intervention. Others demanded humanity be stopped. Some feared that humanity was becoming exactly what the Breath had always claimed. A dangerous predator. But those who truly understood the situation knew the difference. The Breath attacked because they wanted resources. Humanity followed because they wanted security. The difference mattered. One was conquest. The other was consequence. Still, the question remained. What would humanity do when they reached Breath space? Would they destroy their enemies? Would they take their worlds? Would they become another empire? Nobody knew. Including me. That uncertainty bothered me. Because after everything I learned about humanity, I realized something important. Humans were not predictable. They could be compassionate. They could be creative. They could be generous. But they could also be extremely dangerous when pushed too far. The galaxy had spent thousands of years fearing the wrong thing. It feared human strength. But maybe it should have feared human patience. Strength could be challenged. Weapons could be matched. Fleets could be defeated. But patience was different. A patient enemy did not need to win quickly. They only needed to continue. And humanity had proven one thing again and again. They could continue longer than anyone expected. When the human fleet finally reached the outer edge of Breath territory, the Dominion attempted one final strategy. They requested negotiations. The same species that had demanded Earth's surrender now requested a conversation. The message reached the human flagship. Commander Pharaoh read it carefully. Then she asked me a question. Oren, what would the Concord do? I considered my answer. The Concord would likely accept negotiations. She nodded. Would they trust the breath? I hesitated. No. Then why negotiate? I did not have an answer. Because that was the question humans often asked. Not just in war. In everything. Why do something if you do not believe it will solve the problem? The human perspective was different. They did not reject diplomacy. They valued it. But they also understood that diplomacy without preparation was simply hope. And hope was not a strategy. Commander Pharaoh agreed to speak with the breath. The communication opened. For the first time since the invasion began, Admiral Corvin appeared on screen. He looked different. Not physically. The breath still looked powerful. Still massive. Still intimidating. But something had changed. Confidence was gone. The creature who once viewed humanity as an easy target now looked uncertain. You have followed us across half the galaxy, Corvin said. Commander Pharaoh remained calm. You entered our space. You destroyed our ships. You pursued our fleet after we retreated. You have proven your strength. He paused. Is this enough? I watched Commander Pharaoh carefully. Many expected anger. A speech about justice. A demand for surrender. Instead, she simply asked. Do you understand why we came? Corvin seemed confused. You came for revenge. No. For punishment. No. Then why? Commander Pharaoh looked directly at him. Because you still do not understand what happened. The Breath Commander said nothing. You attacked Earth because you thought humans were weak. You believed our silence meant helplessness. You believed our lack of visible weapons meant we had no ability to defend ourselves. That mistake is the reason we are here. Corvin leaned forward. Then what do you want? The answer came immediately. A guarantee. A guarantee that no Breath Commander, no Breath Government, and no Breath successor will ever look at another civilization and decide they are easy prey. The Breath Commander stared at her. You want to control us? No. Then what? We want you to learn. That answer confused him. It confused many people watching the transmission. Because the galaxy understood conquest. It understood punishment. It understood revenge. But learning? That was different. Commander Pharaoh continued. You have spent your entire history believing that power gives you the right to take. You need to understand something. Power gives you responsibility. The transmission ended. The Breath did not surrender immediately. They were too proud. But something had changed. For the first time, they were not fighting against humans. They were thinking about them. And sometimes, understanding an enemy was the first step toward accepting reality. The next several weeks changed galactic history. The Concord opened discussions with both sides. The Breath Dominion was forced to answer for its actions. Not destroyed. Not erased. Held responsible. Many species were surprised by humanity's demands. They expected revenge. They expected destruction. Instead, humans requested reforms. The Breath military structure was changed. Their expansion policies were restricted. Their conquered worlds were given choices. Humanity did not erase the Breath. They did something far more difficult. They forced them to change. Many in the galaxy struggled to understand this. They expected humans to behave like the stories described. A terrifying predator. A relentless force. A species that could not stop. But they had misunderstood the lesson. Humanity was not dangerous because it wanted to destroy. Humanity was dangerous because it wanted to solve. And sometimes solving a problem required uncomfortable decisions. Years later, historians would study the Breath War as one of the most important events in galactic history. Not because of the battles. Not because of the weapons. But because it changed how civilizations viewed humanity. Before the war, humans were considered young. New. Unproven. After the war, nobody called them that anymore. The galaxy had learned the truth. Humanity did not need to be the strongest species. It did not need the largest fleet. It did not need the most advanced technology. Because humanity had something much older. Something built into its very nature. The ability to adapt. The ability to endure. The ability to continue. I remained with the human fleet for another year after the war. I studied them. I talked with them. I watched them rebuild. And the thing that surprised me most was not their military capability. It was what happened after victory. They repaired damaged ships. They helped former enemies. They shared technology. They returned home. They celebrated. Then they went back to normal life. That was the strangest thing about humans. They could build weapons capable of frightening the galaxy. Then spend the next day planting trees. They could fight a war across stars. Then argue about food preferences. They could face impossible dangers. Then laugh together afterward. The galaxy saw their strength. But living among them, I saw something else. Their humanity. And maybe that was the most important discovery of all. The oldest law in the galaxy was never really about fear. It was never a warning that humans were monsters. It was a reminder that every civilization should think carefully before choosing conflict. Because when you threaten humanity, you are not just fighting a species. You are challenging thousands of years of adaptation. The breath broke the oldest law in the galaxy. They hunted humans. And they discovered the most dangerous thing about humanity was never their weapons. It was the simple fact that once humans decided something mattered. No matter how far they had to travel. No matter how long it took. No matter what stood in their way. Because humans were never the prey. They were never the hunted. They were the ones who kept walking. And eventually, everything else had to move aside. But also full of dangers. Humanity did not build its defenses because it hated the galaxy. It built them because it wanted to survive in it. That was the part many species misunderstood. They saw preparation and assumed aggression. They saw strength and assumed ambition. They saw weapons and assumed war. But humans had a different relationship with power. They did not build weapons because they wanted to use them. They built weapons because they never wanted to be helpless again. That lesson came from their own history. Long before humanity reached the stars, they had learned the cost of being unprepared. They had experienced wars. Conflicts. Moments when survival depended on people making impossible choices. Those memories shaped them. The humans carried their history with them. Every mistake. Every victory. Every tragedy. They remembered. And remembering made them careful. After the Breath War, many civilizations wanted to understand humans better. Some approached with curiosity. Others approached with fear. The fear was understandable. A species capable of hiding a fleet for 40 years was intimidating. A species capable of defeating the breath was intimidating. A species that refused to stop once threatened was intimidating. But those who actually met humans discovered something surprising. They were not what the stories suggested. They were not emotionless warriors. They were not conquerors waiting for an opportunity. They were ordinary. That was the strangest thing. The species that had shocked the galaxy was made of individuals who worried about small things. They laughed. They created. They explored. They asked questions. They made mistakes. They cared. The same species that could defeat an empire could also spend an entire afternoon trying to repair a broken machine simply because they enjoyed solving problems. That contradiction confused many aliens. But eventually, they began to understand. Humanity's greatest strength was not their ability to fight. It was their ability to care. Because humans did not fight for conquest. They fought for things they valued. Family. Home. Friends. Future generations. The things they believed were worth protecting. That was why the breath failed. The breath saw Earth as a resource. Humans saw Earth as home. The difference between those two ideas was the difference between victory and defeat. A resource could be taken. A home would be defended. After the war, the Galactic Concord changed the ancient law. For the first time in history, it was officially written. The law that had existed before the Concord itself finally received a name. The Human Boundary Principle. The wording was simple. Do not initiate hostile action against humanity or human territory without understanding the consequences. Many argued that the law gave humans special treatment. The law was not about protecting humans. It was about because the galaxy had learned something important. You could negotiate with humans. You could disagree with humans. You could compete with humans. But you should never underestimate them. Never assume silence meant surrender. Never assume patience meant weakness. Never assume kindness meant helplessness. Because humanity had spent thousands of years proving one simple truth. The quietest species can still be the strongest. Years later, I returned to Earth. My first visit. After spending decades observing humanity from a distance, I finally walked on the planet I had studied for so long. And I discovered something that surprised me. Earth was not a military world. It was not a fortress. It was not the terrifying place many aliens imagined. It was beautiful. Cities filled with lights. Forests stretching across continents. Oceans covering most of the planet. Millions of different cultures existing together. Billions of individuals living completely ordinary lives. They did not look like the species that defeated the breath. They looked normal. A child laughing. A family eating together. People rushing to work. Artists creating. Scientists experimenting. People arguing about meaningless things. People helping strangers. Life continuing. And that was when I finally understood the greatest lesson humanity had taught the galaxy. Power does not define a civilization. How it uses power does. The breath had power. They used it to take. Humanity gained power. They used it to protect. That was the difference. The breath believed strength gave them permission. Humanity believed strength gave them responsibility. And that was why the oldest law existed. Not because humans were monsters. Not because humans were unstoppable. But because the universe had already seen what happened when someone made the mistake of believing they could control humanity. The breath thought they were hunting a young civilization. They thought they found an easy victory. They thought the old law was nothing more than fear. They were wrong. The law was not a warning about what humans would do. It was a warning about what humans would become when forced. And that was something every civilization eventually learned. Humans did not search for enemies. They did not travel the galaxy looking for conquest. They did not wake up every day planning battles. They simply wanted to live. But if someone came to their home, if someone threatened their people, if someone forced them into a fight, humanity would respond. Not with anger. Not with panic. With patience. With preparation. With the determination of a species that had survived everything its own world could throw at it. The breath broke the oldest law in the galaxy. They ignored thousands of years of warnings. They believed they were the hunters. But they discovered the truth too late. Humanity had never been the prey. Humanity had always been the thing that survived. The thing that adapted. The thing that continued. And across the galaxy, one phrase became known by every species that traveled among the stars. A phrase passed from generation to generation. A phrase taught to children before they ever left their home worlds. Respect your neighbors. Honor your agreements. Choose peace whenever possible. But remember one thing. Never hunt humans. Because if you do, you better be ready for them to come looking for you. Many years have passed since the Breath Dominion entered human space. Many years since the galaxy watched 312 warships disappear into the darkness. Many years since everyone learned the truth behind the oldest law. But even after all that time, I still receive the same question from young analysts joining the Galactic Concord. They always ask the same thing. Oren, were you afraid when you first saw the human fleet? The answer is complicated. Because yes. I was afraid. Anyone who says they were not afraid after seeing humanity's hidden strength is either lying or does not understand what they witnessed. But my fear was never because I thought humans were evil. It was because I finally understood something that the galaxy had misunderstood for thousands of years. Humanity was not dangerous because it wanted power. Humanity was dangerous because it knew exactly when power was necessary. That difference changes everything. A species that wants power will always search for opportunities to use it. A species that understands responsibility will only use it when there is no other choice. And that was humanity. The galaxy spent centuries asking the wrong question. It asked, how powerful are humans? But the better question was, what happens when humans decide something is worth protecting? That was the question the breath answered for everyone. And nobody forgot the answer. After the war, humanity did something unexpected. They did not expand their territory. They did not demand control over breath worlds. They did not create a human empire. Many civilizations expected that. They assumed that after defeating the strongest military force in the galaxy, humanity would take advantage of its position. They were wrong. Humanity returned home. They repaired their ships. They rebuilt damaged stations. They helped restore worlds affected by the conflict. They did something that confused many alien leaders. They moved forward. Not as conquerors. As survivors. That was when the galaxy finally understood. The human fleet had never been built for conquest. It had been built for survival. There is a difference. A conqueror builds weapons because they want to take something. A survivor builds weapons because they do not want something taken from them. The breath had attacked humanity because they believed every civilization operated the same way they did. They believed strength created ownership. They believed weakness created opportunity. They believed the universe belonged to whoever could take it. Humanity proved them wrong. Strength did not create the right to take. Strength created the responsibility to protect. That became one of the most important lessons in galactic history. Not because humans forced everyone to believe it. Because everyone saw it happen. The story of the breath invasion became a warning taught throughout the galaxy. Young students learned about it. Military commanders studied it. Diplomats discussed it. But every species interpreted the lesson differently. Some feared humanity. Some respected humanity. Some admired humanity. But nobody underestimated humanity anymore. The old mistake was gone. Forever. Because the galaxy had finally seen what happened when someone hunted humans. They discovered that humans did not simply defend themselves. They adapted. They learned. They responded. And once they started moving, they did not stop. Years after the war, I asked Commander Pharaoh one final question. I asked her something I had wondered about since the beginning. If the breath had never attacked Earth, would humanity have revealed its true capabilities? She thought about it for a long time. Then she smiled. No. Why? Because we didn't build those things to show anyone. Then why build them? She looked toward the stars. Because someday someone might come. That answer was very human. Simple. Practical. Almost obvious. Humans did not prepare because they expected war. They prepared because they understood the universe. The universe was beautiful. But it was also unpredictable. And humans had survived by accepting that reality. They hoped for peace. They worked for peace. They searched for peace. But they also understood something important. Peace without the ability to defend it was only a temporary agreement. That was why humanity continued exploring. That was why humanity continued learning. That was why humanity continued reaching toward the unknown. Not because they wanted to conquer the stars. Because they wanted to understand them. And perhaps that was the greatest mystery about humans. They were a species capable of incredible destruction. But they were equally capable of incredible creation. They could build weapons that frightened entire galaxies. And they could build instruments that searched for distant worlds. They could fight wars. And they could create music. They could defeat enemies. And they could forgive them. They contained contradictions that many species struggled to understand. But those contradictions were exactly what made them human. The galaxy had searched for a simple answer. Were humans dangerous? Were they peaceful? Were they warriors? Were they explorers? The answer was always the same. Yes. They were all of those things. Humanity was not one thing. Humanity was a story still being written. And nobody knew what the next chapter would bring. But everyone remembered the previous one. The chapter where a powerful empire looked at a small blue planet and saw weakness. The chapter where they ignored the oldest law in the galaxy. The chapter where they discovered that the quiet civilization they wanted to conquer had spent thousands of years preparing. The chapter where hunters became the hunted. And the chapter where the galaxy learned a lesson it would never forget. Do not mistake silence for weakness. Do not mistake kindness for surrender. Do not mistake patience for fear. Because humans are patient. Humans are kind. Humans are peaceful. But humans are also survivors. And survivors do not disappear. They do not surrender easily. They do not forget threats. They do not abandon what matters. They keep moving. They keep adapting. They keep searching for a way forward. That is why the oldest law remains. Not because humans demanded it. Not because humans forced the galaxy to obey. But because every civilization that came before eventually learned the same truth. The universe is full of powerful species. There are species stronger than humans. There are species faster than humans. There are species with technology humanity has not yet discovered. But there is one thing humanity has that makes them different. They keep trying. They keep learning. They keep improving. And they keep moving forward even when the universe tells them they should stop. The Breath Dominion learned this lesson through defeat. Others learned it through observation. And future civilizations would learn it through history. The oldest law in the galaxy was never really about humans. It was about understanding consequences. Every action creates a reaction. Every choice creates a result. And sometimes, the greatest mistake a civilization can make is believing another civilization has nothing left to show. The Breath looked at humanity and saw a young species. They saw a planet without a fleet. They saw a civilization without galactic influence. They saw an easy victory. But they failed to see what was hidden beneath the surface. They failed to see the curiosity, the determination, the creativity, the patience, the endless desire to survive. They failed to see humanity. And that was their greatest mistake. Because the galaxy eventually learned something that cannot be forgotten. You can challenge humans. You can compete with humans. You can disagree with humans. You can even stand against humans. But if you choose to hunt them, make sure you understand exactly what you are doing. Because the moment you attack humanity, the moment you threaten their home, the moment you force them to choose between survival and surrender, you are no longer hunting a species. You have become the reason they move. And humanity has spent its entire existence proving one thing. Nothing in the universe can stop something that refuses to stop moving. This was the story of the Breath Dominion. The empire that broke the oldest law in the galaxy. The empire that believed humans were prey. And the empire that discovered the truth too late. Humans were never the hunted. They were never the weak. They were never the easy target. They were humanity. And humanity always finds a way.